I want to share this with you because I want to be closer. Or I
Mm.
want to share this with you because I want us to understand each other better. Or I want to share this with you because I don't want disconnection with you and I want to hold on to this. Reminding them that you're doing this because you desire closeness, not because they're bad and you need to punish them.
I'm Rachel, and you're listening to the Owning Your Sexual Self podcast. Hey everyone, thanks again for joining into this episode of Owning Your Sexual Self. I have on an awesome guest with me today, Dr. Alison Ash, aka Dr. Allie, who is a trauma-informed intimacy coach and educator, a Stanford University lecturer, author, and the founder of TurnOn.Love. As a sociologist with a PhD from Stanford, Dr. Allie has a comprehensive understanding of the complex societal challenges that often lead to unsatisfying and disempowering intimate experiences. She designs workshops, courses, and retreats and offers individuals and couples coaching to give the tools to be able to cultivate and sustain nourishing emotional and sexual intimacy. Dr. Allie invites you to turn on pleasure, intimacy, and love at www.turnon.love. I am really excited for our conversation today. This actually might end up being a two-parter because we are really focusing today on ruptures in relationships. And so how healing these ruptures actually leads us into right, being able to uncover these things, being able to do deeper processing. And then part two of this, we plan to actually specialize and drop in more to specifically ruptures in terms of affairs within relationships. So let's jump into this. I'm excited. She's in the waiting room, so let's get into this. All right. Thanks so much again for being here and listening. All right. Dr. Alison Ash, also known as Dr. Allie, welcome to the Owning Your Sexual Self podcast.
Thank you so much. Loving being here and grateful you have me on your show.
Yeah, I know Jordan connected with us through email, and Jordan has been a colleague and a friend of mine for quite some time. And I know she has her podcast super successful over there. And we always exchange guests. If we have a really bomb guest, we email each other like, you have to have this person on your show. So I'm excited, and I always like to share that with people because it feels good to know that you were liked and you're a good interview guest.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So, and it's really cool to come across people that are in this same or similar role as I am. I've done the sex coaching role, sex education, now in sex therapy and private practice. And you are a lecturer at Stanford. You went to Stanford. You have the TurnOn.Love. You have a host of things that you're offering people. And I always like to ask people how did you even get in this industry? Did you most of us, I don't think we're in preschool, like, I'm going to talk about sex when I grow up,
Certainly not, certainly not in preschool, though I do think I was probably the one in the friend group that talked about sex the most if I just like flash back through my memories of childhood and teenagehood. But I would say for me, it became more crystallized when I was getting my PhD. And my field is sociology. I studied in sex and gender and social psychology. And I loved teaching. I didn't absolutely love research, and I also didn't absolutely love academia. I knew I didn't want to stay homed within academia. And I was doing some really amazing research with one of my advisors looking at college hookup culture and orgasm differentials. We were actually the first to publish about the orgasm gap. And so we were doing all this incredible research. And then what happens in academia is you spend sometimes years, which we did, working on publishing research, and then if you do well, it gets press, and then you move on to the next thing. And for me, I was just like, wait a minute, there are so many juicy takeaways. There's so many insights that our research has that can help people have more empowering, satisfying, pleasurable sexual interactions. And it felt like I don't want to say a waste, but certainly a missed opportunity to not take these findings and figure out real world applications that could support people. And I was moving towards the end of my PhD career and knowing I didn't want to stay in academia, I started to offer workshops outside of Stanford for the general population. And the reception was so positive. People were so hungry for it. And then I just started creating more and more workshops, oftentimes not necessarily ones that would be welcomed within the Stanford community, like how to eat pussy like a champ, for example, which is one of my more popular and somewhat notorious workshops. And so, yeah, when I finally graduated, I decided that I wanted to open my own business offering education, but then also sex and intimacy coaching. So then I went down a whole new line of education, studying different therapeutic modalities and coaching modalities, which was way more fun, a lot more experiential. And I like working with individuals and groups and seeing the impact that I get to create rather than writing something that's going to be a drop in a bucket that you never even know who's going to read it or the ripple effect it might have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that spicier workshop that you do, because I definitely want to have you on again in the future. That was originally what Jordan had said, like, you need to have her on the show to talk about this. And then I know you were reviewing the show and you're like, no, I think there's something better, like we need to discuss first to have on the show. Which, yeah, that's our conversation today, right? It felt very aligned. But that's, yeah, I have similar experiences in going through my own, studies and whatnot here through sex therapy and sex education. It felt almost like you could do it and it was okay as long as it was within these guidelines. And so when I started doing more into the coaching role, I just felt like that opened up so much opportunity for what I wanted to talk about. And I think, yeah, through a lot of people, a lot of family members, a lot of friends for a loop of like, going to my husband, like, do you see what your wife is talking about on social media? I'm like, yeah, like people, as you said, it's like people are hungry for this information. And for so long, we've been shamed about this stuff, right? So if somebody's willing to step up and take the platform and talk about this, it's like build it and they will come, literally.
It's so true. And I'm very fortunate to have supportive parents. I mean, my mom has told me repeatedly how she wished that she could have this education when she was younger. My dad once told me, he said, I just love that you're helping nerdy guys like me find love.
Aw.
It's very sweet, very tender.
Yeah, very, very nice. Well,
Yeah.
good. Okay, so you work with individuals and with couples in the coaching space, and that kind of leads us into today's topic of these ruptures that happen in relationships. And so I'm excited to have this conversation. Again, I think it's a pretty hot topic. How many couples do we know that are going through conflict right now and are unsure how to navigate it? And as you said, you have a formula that you'll share with us. And so I very much look forward to this episode being a resource for people, and even for myself. I hope that I will also, I'm sure, learn some things today.
Yeah, I have to say that ruptures are universal in intimacy. I think that fear of having ruptures and conflict is one of the biggest barriers to intimacy that keeps people self-protected. And what I always like to tell folks is rather than doing all of the mental and emotional gymnastics to avoid any possibility of conflict or ruptures, it's much better to be comfortable navigating them and repairing them. Oftentimes, a rupture happens when it wasn't even your intention, but you still have a harmful impact. And so there's really nothing that you can do to avoid hurt feelings in intimacy. Intimacy is messy, and we're opening ourselves up and we're being vulnerable, and that does open us up to being hurt. And think of repairs as an investment in relationships. And because we don't repair if we don't care about the relationship. And then for that reason, having successful repair conversations is one of the best ways to build trust and intimacy and safety. I know that for me in new relationships, not just romantic relationships, any kind of new relationship, I'm somewhat holding my breath till we have our first rupture and repair, because I want to know that the other person has both the willingness and the ability to show up and to withstand those inevitable relational challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just having a conversation with somebody just the other day around this thought of, right, in a relationship when a couple will say, oh, we never fight. And I'm like, that's not necessarily the best thing, right? Like, not to say that you should fight to get to the point of yelling and arguing and screaming at each other, but right, conflict is very normal, as you're saying, in relationships, it's bound to happen. So in relationship, right, and I think if you dive into attachment and what a person's attachment is it secure, is it insecure? That fear, I'm so glad you named that, the fear of, okay, what does this mean for my relationship if conflict happens? And just the fear of like, yeah, is the person going to leave me? Am I going to want to jump ship? Am I going to get the relationship ick? What is something that came up in this conversation the other day? But and same to what you're saying, so often I'm telling my couples that I'm working with, and even in my own marriage, like, okay, we're going through something right now, and what we do right now in this moment when it's hard and when it sucks and when it's difficult, like that makes all the difference once we get to the other side of this. But we have to do the work. We have to do the crying and the understanding and building the curiosity around how each other are feeling and the validation and right, all the things.
That's
Um,
right.
oh yeah, but it's hard. Relationships are hard, right? No one tells you that. It's we see in the fairy tales and Disney movies, right? It's just all like unicorns and rainbows, but that is not reality by any means.
Very true. Very
Mhm.
true.
Okay, so let's get into what some of these ruptures are. So first, if I want to just clarify too what the word rupture means. Can you give us sort of a definition for listeners?
Yeah, I love that. So a rupture could be a conflict, but sometimes it's a feeling of being missed, misunderstood, um, hurt feelings that can happen when two people's wounds might rub up against each other. It's when the connection feels like there's a blimp on the radar and it's like, oh, that was a disconnection or that was an ouch. And I like to use the word ruptures because it feels a little bit more all-encompassing than conflict, where I
Mhm.
think people have a particular perception of what conflict is, which may include yelling and screaming. It doesn't have to, as you're pointing to, but conflict can feel heavy and weighty. And I think a lot of people have shame around it. Like, oh no, I have conflict. I'm bad. I've done something bad.
Mhm.
Rather than just realizing, okay, ruptures are inevitable. And I think it helps people have a slightly different association with it.
Hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that because yeah, I think even my mind went to conflict and I agree. Like rupture is the more all-encompassing word. Definitely. Yeah, that ooh, right? Like that feeling of ooh, something, yeah, something went wrong or how am I feeling about this? I want to make it right. Maybe I don't want to make it right. Right again, getting into am I willing to do this or not?
Hmm.
So, okay,
Hmm.
so share with us, you said you have a formula, maybe it's too early to jump into that, but what would you say in your practice, maybe a recent conflict or a rupture that came up in a relationship that you've been working with? What would you say are some of these common ones that you're seeing in couples that you're working with?
Oh, wow. All sorts of ruptures. It could be around co-parenting or co-living dynamics. Something as simple as like sharing the load around housework. Oftentimes, ruptures happen around a misalignment on values or priorities or not honoring your word. Or actually, a lot of the time, ruptures happen because people have different memories or understandings of what agreements were.
Mm.
Um, Oftentimes, I'm working with non-monogamous couples, not exclusively, but often, and they might have all sorts of ruptures that come up around how they navigate non-monogamy or jealousy that can arise. Jealousy can arise, of course, in any kind of relational dynamic. Um, needs that aren't being met, emotional needs, needs for freedom and autonomy, needs for safety and security. Sometimes ruptures happen around sex or around differences in desires. One person maybe has a different libido or is kinkier or just has fantasies that don't feel like they overlap.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, ruptures can be even just small things like, ouch, you said something hurtful, and you didn't notice, or you didn't come and defend me in a conversation that we were having, or whatever it may be.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then are we normalizing the fact that ruptures can be like common and frequent?
Yes,
Okay.
ruptures can be common and frequent. And I think, as you were pointing to earlier, there are some folks who are more conflict avoidant or maybe perhaps people pleasers. There's also folks who are just a lot more easygoing. And I'm not one of them. I wish I was. I'm pretty particular and sensitive. And so, I do think that for some of us, we may, if we're more sensitive or if we're actually more willing to turn towards our emotional landscape, um, then like we might be navigating with the content with more regularity, but that doesn't mean that these things aren't happening for folks. It might just mean that folks are a little less aware or brush it off more or brush it under the carpet. And so, yeah, so I think that there's all sorts of different ways that people relate to conflict.
Mhm.
Um, in my practice, I see three main ways that efforts to repair ruptures go awry. And these happen time and time again, and it really undermines genuine effort to repair ruptures. So I think the biggest one that I see is doing it at the wrong time. So it happens for most couples, particularly, or not even just couples. Let's say this could happen in friend relationships, workplace dynamics, any kind of relationship. What happens is conflict is so uncomfortable. it's scary because our shame comes up that we did something wrong in intimate relationships, whether it's close friendships or romantic relationships. There's a fear of rejection or abandonment, even if intellectually we don't think it's going to happen. Sometimes physiologically in the nervous system where attachment happens, there can be this fear. And so what happens is people rush to try to fix it right away. And what happens is if somebody's really hurt or really angry or really in a shame spiral, oftentimes people are outside of their window of tolerance. They're outside of their ability to be able to repair effectively. What happens when somebody's outside their window of tolerance? There's so much activation in the nervous system, so many big emotions, so much fear, is their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's responsible for every single skill we need to repair well. Empathy, logic, memory, social connection gets bypassed. And so what I see people doing is trying to repair ruptures when they actually don't have the access to the faculties that they need to be able to repair well. And they're doing it because they want to try to fix it because they're so uncomfortable and afraid, but they don't actually have the ability to do it in a way where they're going to be more able to be heard, express themselves more clearly. And the biggest indication I can tell folks of whether or not they're ready to do a repair is if they have access to curiosity and empathy. You cannot repair well if you don't have access to curiosity and empathy. And if you're too dysregulated, you won't be able to. And that's very human and very normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that you named that. I think that I agree that's common. And that reminds me of, right, if a couple, or even I like that you named it too, that this can also happen in friendships. This isn't just in intimate settings. But right, there's the people, the one person that's like, no, we need to talk about it now. We need to hash it out now. Let's not go to bed mad, right? Like that sort of mentality. And that other person might be saying like, no, I need the time to process. I need the time to be in a better space to have the conversation. And then I think where a lot of couples go wrong is that they honor that space and then they never come back to it. Which,
Yes.
yeah, it's the hard part. It's like, okay, I don't really want to.
One of the things I always tell folks is if you need to take space, if you need to take time to regulate your nervous system, schedule when you're going to come back to the conversation. For the person who's very anxious and wants to try to repair right away, it's going to be uncomfortable no matter what. But if they know tomorrow night, Tuesday at noon, whatever it is, we're going to come back and talk about it, it's so much easier for that attachment system to trust that that the repair isn't going to be ongoing and cause some kind of harm that's irreparable. And what I say is if Tuesday at noon when you're scheduled to come back for the conversation comes and you're still not ready to have the conversation, you still show up and say, I'm committed to repairing, but I just need more time. And then you reschedule again. And I think that that's the difference between taking space and avoiding.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 100%. And I like that too, because we naming that time and being very clear on the time. And I like that you said Tuesday at noon versus like, we'll talk about it tomorrow, because then right, tomorrow, there's a whole host of times that tomorrow is going to take place. And then I always tell couples too, and I tell me if you agree with this, but if I'm the person that needs a space, or I'm the person that's causing or calling for the halt or the pause or the whatever you want to name it, it's my responsibility to then like initiate that we're coming back to it. It's not on the other person to, right? Because I think in that case, like the other person is trying to honor that other one's space. So would you agree with that approach as well?
I would definitely agree with that. And I would also say, I think it's the responsibility of probably both parties, but certainly the person who needs more space to take that space intentionally and to do the kinds of things that are going to help regulate their nervous system and process how they're feeling so that they can come back towards that repair conversation well equipped. So that might look like engaging in self-care. It might look like getting support from an external party. It might look like journaling and I like to do voice notes. Actually, it's easier for me than journal, but whatever it is, so that you can have a cathartic experience, so that you can understand how you're feeling. And you don't have to no longer be angry or upset, but you do need to be able to hold your anger and upset with still having access to curiosity and empathy for the other person's experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gosh, yeah. I feel like I'm I say these same things all the time. I'm like, I'm glad to hear from you. I know, again, you're a lecturer at Stanford. Like, this makes me feel good that what I'm providing to people is legit and I'm on the right path with things. So
Yeah.
that is good. I feel very validated.
As do I. It's nice when you meet another professional who's on the same page with you.
Mhm. And so, okay, so you mentioned there was three things. So the first one being the wrong time. What would the other two be?
The second one is realizing that there's a difference between emotional conversations and practical conversations. And this is something that I work with folks around in any kind of relational dynamic, including in corporate settings, because I think what happens is a lot of conversations will start practical and turn emotional. And these are actually two different kinds of conversations, and they require two different kinds of responses. And what happens when one person is having an emotional conversation and the other one is having a practical conversation at the same time is they're having two separate conversations and they're missing each other. And when there's emotional content, you're in an emotional conversation, and most repairs are emotional conversations. And so the appropriate responses are curiosity, empathy, reassurance, validation, normalization. These are all the responses we want to have for an emotional conversation. Practical conversations are about problem solving, logistics, forming agreements. And a practical conversation is often also necessary, but the emotional conversation always has to come first because A, you're going to be getting really essential information that's going to better inform the practical conversation. And B, the ways that the folks involved will relate to the practical conversation will be entirely different if they feel heard and understood and empathized with. And so I think identifying when we're in emotional terrain versus practical terrain is important. And I think because conflict is so uncomfortable, and because I think we socialize and condition people, especially particularly people who are socialized to be men, to try to fix things. And maybe we don't have the right education on how to empathize and just hold space and be with emotions and feelings. People rush way too quickly to the practical side of the conversation.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's a helpful practice too when you're going into a conversation for people to also be upfront. Like, I just need you to hold space in this. I don't want to go into problem solving yet. Or I need, right, like being able to state their needs. I need to feel validated. I need to feel heard. I need really a hold space, which sometimes people don't understand exactly what that means. But I think, yeah, I 100% agree. And so if this is happening, if a couple or somebody that's in the conversation, this notifies or is aware that this is two different conversations happening. One is being practical, one is being emotional. How do you address that without kind of stirring the pot or right defensiveness coming up or whatnot?
Well, the first thing is to make sure that we validate emotions. Emotions don't have to be practical or logical, and they're valid in themselves. And I think helping people learn exactly what you said, how to hold space. What does it mean to practice listening and really make sure that the other person feels heard and understood, and that you understand their subjective experience and how they're relating to what happened. Empathizing, which I think is one of the most, if not the most important skill in human relating. And I think, unfortunately, most people don't know how to empathize well. When people empathize, they tend to do me too statements, trying to find a sense of relatability, or they'll do at least statements and trying to reassure somebody in a way that kind of suggests they shouldn't feel how they're feeling. Or they'll offer explanations, which again communicates you shouldn't feel how you're feeling because of this explanation I'm offering, rather than really be curious about how they're feeling, being curious about the impact of how they're feeling, connect with that in your own body, know what it feels like to feel hurt or misunderstood or rejected or ignored or deprioritized or whatever it is. And even if that experience wouldn't make you feel that way, you still know what that emotion feels like. And if you can connect with that emotion and you can express that you care, that you get it, and that you care. And I think what helps people hold space is to realize that there's the difference between intention and impact. And so if you're telling me about how I've impacted you and that wasn't at all my intention, the momentum is for me to try to explain my intention, because I think that's somehow going to fix how you're feeling. But instead, if I can say, okay, that wasn't my intention, and this is how I impacted you. I want to understand how I impacted you. Oh God, that sounds really painful. That makes so much sense why you would feel that way. Like, and not even just necessarily rushing to the I'm sorry's, but like, tell me more. Oh, I get how that impacted you. That makes so much sense. Like, that's holding space. And the other person is going to feel like if you're able to do that, that's the connection, that's the way to start to rebuild the connection that's experienced the rupture.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, thank you for offering clarity to that. I think that's so important. And it like especially like that you named the not getting to the I'm sorry. I think so often people jump to that right away, right? And that, I think that's the either the people pleaser or the wanting to avoid the conflict, but right, the I'm sorry, let's just get this over with and move on. But yeah, that I think that holding space and truly I like to when I'm working with people, I like the phrase of okay, what else? The tell me more. Right,
Mhm.
like to encourage them to keep going. And what I find, especially when I see this unfolding in sessions, what a person shares in like those first couple sentences, I feel is almost like testing the waters. How much am I gonna be heard and validated and seen and felt? And then when your partner responds with, right, as you said, that active listening, the validation, the invitation to go deeper and to keep sharing, it's like, and then that second wave of what comes through, it's like, it's almost like I literally physically see their walls come down. It's like, okay, I'm safe here. I'm safe to share. And like, again, like as we're speaking to today, that's like when real shit starts to happen, right? We really get somewhere.
Yeah, you're spot on. And I think exactly what you named is what people are afraid. They're afraid that if they hold space and they empathize, somebody's going to continue to reveal more and maybe even get more upset, and that that's somehow bad or wrong. They want to try to de-escalate. But the reality is, those emotions are there. And if you can support the unfolding process, it's cathartic. It allows them to get it out. They're not going to hold on to it. It's going to be a really good defense against resentment or contempt. And so I think that people are afraid that they're going to make it worse rather than realizing that you need to allow all of that to come out in order to make it better.
Yeah, it feels very therapeutic as we're talking. I'm like, we're basically training people to be little mini therapists in this podcast episode. And yeah, just to name it to her, if your partner is not willing to do this, this is why therapy and coaching is such a great place because we will be those people for you, right? We will be the ones to hold space and to validate and practice the active listening and whatnot for you to be able to process.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Oh, so good. I'm loving all of this. And so let's get into now number three, in these main ruptures that you're seeing.
So the third biggest way I see repairs going awry, and this kind of will start to lead into my repair formula, is there isn't turn taking. So sometimes a rupture happens where I've harmed you and it doesn't feel like I've been harmed. But the reality is in a lot of conflicts and ruptures, both people feel hurt or feel misunderstood. And so what happens is both people are trying to feel heard and understood at the same time. And so then they're also talking past each other. So I might say something like, you did this and how could you do this? I feel so hurt. And then you say, but you did that. And so now we're both kind of competing
Mhm.
for the other person's empathy and reassurance and accountability. And so I think what is way more effective is to tune their experience, using a lot of I statements, really being vulnerable, talking about feelings and impact. The other person is going to first practice active listening, making sure that the other person feels heard and understood, that you're getting their experience right, that you're emphasizing the right pieces, that you're on the same page. And remember here, there's two subjective experiences. There's no one objective reality. So
Mhm.
your job is to understand their subjective experience to the best of your ability, reassuring yourself you're going to have your own turn to share your own subjective experience. So yeah, so the first piece is active listening. The second piece is to empathize. The third piece is to take accountability. What, if anything, can you own? And realizing that there's ways that we can all be challenging to be in relationships, at least sometimes. Can
Mhm.
you own that you're bad at time management? Can you own that sometimes you can be lazy, or that you can be defensive, or that you can be impatient, or that you can be high maintenance, or that sometimes you get really self-absorbed, or that whatever it is. I think that if you can be humble and own where you might have fallen short, then what happens is the other person doesn't have to hold on to that anger so tightly, because it becomes this shared reality. Like if you say you're right, Dr. Ali, like I am bad with time management, and I was late, and I get how that would have you feel, maybe like I don't value your time or deprioritize, so that's part of the empathy piece, then I don't actually have to hold on to that anymore. I'm like, okay, great, like you get it. And then I can start to relax and be more available for connection. And then you might move to the last piece, which is offering reassurance. And here and it has to be genuine, it has to be believable reassurance. I don't want you to say in this hypothetical situation, I'm never going to be late again. That's not possible. But maybe you could say something like, I do value your time and I get how special our connection is. And I understand the impact of me being late, and my intention is never to have you feel deprioritized. And getting to spend time with you is so valuable for me, right? Genuine reassurances that's not putting a bow on it, making it all better and trying to fix it, but it's just helping to address the wound and the fear that came up for me that you wouldn't know if we didn't do the first few steps. That gives you the information so that you know what to be accountable for and what to empathize with and what reassurances are going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Then we would switch, and you might share with me about your experience, or maybe I miscommunicated something, so you weren't really aware of the expectations that I had, or whatever it might have been.
Yeah, and I call this like a tit for tat when that back and forth starts to have. It's like this ping pong. Well, you did this. Well, you said this. Well, you didn't do this, right? And it's like, yeah, when it unfolds in session, I'm like, we got to pause. This is not helpful whatsoever. And also I would find in this formula that you're going through where, right, person A gets all the validation, they get that, right, they're feeling all good and bubbly and whatnot. They put a bow on that interaction. Then I almost wonder if whatever that thing was that person B was trying to come at in the beginning is even still present, because I wonder if it's sometimes they're just using that as a defense mechanism to take that pressure off of them and to put it back onto the other person. And not to say, right, I'm sure in a lot of cases there's actually a thing that person B, has a quirk over, but yeah, I just wonder, it's like when you can do conversation well, is that thing as big as it seemed in the beginning of that conversation, is kind of what I'm getting at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think oftentimes this is a really good way to diffuse some of the defensive mechanisms that we can put up around not wanting to feel the shame or the guilt, or the ways that we can acknowledge that we've hurt somebody that we don't really want to hurt, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just obviously you're an expert in this, so I'd love to hear, we're talking about all the things that you want to do. Would you be able to quickly go over a list of in Rupture, like things to avoid, things that you don't want to do? Because I think that's
Sure.
also helpful side of the conversation.
Totally. I think it's really helpful to focus on the issue at hand. Oftentimes what happens is people then pull out this entire laundry list. So now I'm telling you about every time that you were late. And that makes it really hard to actually address this present moment hurt. So it's okay to say, like, this feels like a pattern, but that's also very different than saying there's 15 things that now you have to try to repair in the same conversation. Overgeneralizing. You never, you always, those are just going to put most people into a place of defensiveness, because nobody is always or never anything, right? Noticing if you're getting stuck in like the specific details. It was 3 times, no, it was 2 times. It was Wednesday, no, it was Thursday. When you're in that tit for tat, as you were saying, around those specific details, you're in a space of defensiveness, and it's better to drop into the emotions rather than those specific details, which honestly don't matter so much. I think it's really helpful to notice if you're disconnecting, if you're putting up a wall, if you're freezing the other person out, if you're feeling really attached to needing to be right, and to remember that you can always take a break in the middle of a repair conversation. That break might just be a few minutes to go for a walk or to take a quick shower, or it might be, let's pause this and come back at it tomorrow, or come back at it with our coach or therapist, or whatever it is, so that you're not creating additional ruptures in your attempt to repair the original rupture.
Yeah, and another big one I see is body language, eye contact, avoiding that, looking away, distracted. I always tell people, like, if this is a deeper conversation, you deserve to have uninterrupted time. So for people with kids, right, like, this happen after the kids go to bed, or kids are with a babysitter, kids are at gymnastics, right? Like something like that, to where it is just the two of you, TV is off, cell phones are away, right? Like you have that undivided attention of one another. Yeah, and then just your body cues, right? Shaking your head, like listening to the person. You're not looking away. You're not sitting there like this with your arms
That's
crossed, like pouting.
that's right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I love that you added that. That's so important. We communicate empathy, not just the words we use, but through our body language. And I think that's spot on. I'm so glad you added that.
Another thing, so I have a communication guide that I share with people as well, and a lot of these things are on here. And another thing that I share from this, and I think I actually got this from Vanessa and Xander Marin's book on sex talks. And in that book, she talks about kind of sharing your fears up front when it comes to a rupture. And so a simple statement going into this, like, I'm nervous to share this, or I'm scared if I share this, it's going to upset you. I'm scared that this is going to further unpack a previous argument, right? Like, but being very forthcoming with that emotion that you're feeling going into it, or fear, right? I think that also helps to immediately disarm that other person because, right, if my spouse comes to me of like, I'm scared you're gonna get mad if I tell you, I'm doing my damned possible to not get mad, right? I'm like, okay, I need to get in check. I don't want to make your fear come true because I love you. You're my person. And I think that's where, as you're talking about, like really that empathy and curiosity, I you just cannot stress like how much I think those words are so spot on. Because yeah, if I'm empathetic and if I'm curious, I'm not going to go into defensiveness, hopefully not going to go into defensiveness, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also saying, I want to share this with you because I want to be closer. Or I
Mm,
want to share this with you because I want us to understand each other better. Or I want to share this with you because I don't want disconnection with you and I want to hold on to this. Reminding them that you're doing this because you desire closeness, not because they're bad and you need to punish them.
mm,
Right. I think that that's helpful and to reassure ourselves. I can't tell you how many times when I'm having a repair conversation, I am soothing myself during that repair conversation, telling my own inner critic that it's okay to make mistakes or ruptures happen inevitably, and that to not let my own fear of not being perfect prevent me from owning my impact. Right.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and just ending like we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. There's again normalizing rupture in relationships, whether that be intimate friendships with parents, with siblings, right? All these different dynamics that ruptures can occur. Yeah, just I think this might, I don't know if this might be a good place for us to pause it and to go into part two of this, but yeah, just normalizing we're human. We're going to make mistakes and that's okay. And again, it's like be willing to do this part of the work, be willing to have the hard conversation.
Yes, and I think the last thing that I would offer is I think it can be really helpful before you have the repair conversation to come up with some agreements together about how you want to navigate the conversation. Like, we're not going to yell, and if we get too upset that we're having a hard time speaking calmly, we're going to take a break. Or we're not going to interrupt, but if I feel like confused or I need a break or I have a question, I'll just put a hand up
Mm,
rather than interrupting. Or we're going to take turns, and this is the ways that we're going to take turns, or we're going to not offer any solutions and try to fix it. If you can come up with those agreements together and get each other's buy-in,
mm,
that will be really impactful for shaping how these repairs happen. And also to realize that the other person doesn't have the ability to repair well, but they do have the willingness, seek support. Like,
mm,
this isn't really modeled or templated for us well in society. And
mm.
we learn this through having somebody hold our hand and teach it to us.
Absolutely. And yeah, we learn this through seeing how our parents, handled conflict growing up or yeah. So I agree. And just before we move on, you mentioned the formula. Can you give us like the bulleted points of what this formula is?
Yes. So person A shares how they're feeling.
Mhm.
Person B listens back, listens and repeats back. Person B empathizes. Person B owns what they can. Maybe likely more empathy will come in there. They offer genuine reassurances. Then person A shares positive impact. What really worked well for them? How do they feel? What was helpful? Realizing that nobody's going to do 100% perfect, but can you really honor and acknowledge the sincere effort person B did to be with you when you're hurt and upset? And then person A asks person B how they're feeling. Do they want to switch roles so that person B can become person A?
Mhm. Wow.
And listeners out there, if you want some more support, feel free to reach out to me through my website, TurnOn.Love. And I have a handout with some repair conversation guidelines and this formula that I would be happy to share with listeners.
Oh, yes, please. All the things.
Yes,
Will be
yes.
going to the website myself to print out the things because this was a very refreshing, a very, as I said, I hoped that this would be a podcast to be able to share as a resource in the future, and it's definitely turned out to be that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're not done yet. This is part one, so we're going to break here and definitely check out the future episode with Dr. Allie. We're going to move into the conversation now, specifically around affairs, and that is a whole different beast, right? In the world of ruptures. So, yeah, check out the Owning Your Sexual Self podcast. It'll probably just be a few episodes after this one that you're currently listening to. And if you liked that, I would say definitely check out part two.
Yes, I look forward to part two. And if you want to learn more about my offerings and work with me, you can go to my website, TurnOn.Love. I have a bunch of on-demand workshops and courses you can rent from home, including one called Repairing Ruptures in Relationships that will guide you through this repair process. I have a course called Sexual and Emotional Intimacy Skills, which is also the same course I teach at Stanford University.
Awesome.
I offer it, it's a 2-month course. I offer it virtually every January through March. So it's upcoming. But if
Mm.
you're listening to this podcast somewhere down in the future, you can also rent that one on demand. And I'm going to offer a special $100 discount code
Oh,
for your listeners for the upcoming live version of this course that starts in January. So I'll have you put that in the show notes, maybe if you're open to that.
yes, absolutely.
I have a course for couples called Sustainable Intimacy. Ruptures can oftentimes be conflict, can be a libido blocker. How do we navigate the various libido blockers out there and reignite the spark so we can have lasting intimacy? And then, of course, I also do coaching for individuals, couples, non-monogamous groups. So if you need any support learning how to cultivate and sustain emotional and sexual intimacy in your relationships, please feel free to reach out. I offer complimentary consultations.
Oh, thank you so much. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you loved it, be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if you really fucking loved it, make sure to tag me on social media at @TheRachelMain. I'll see you next week.